Okay, so thank you for coming for the session on AI chatbots or the new agent criminal. So this session will be moderated by Grimaud Valla, partner at DTMV Avocat, and he will introduce you with the session in more details. Practical reminder, if you're welcome to take pictures of this session and all sessions, and then post them on LinkedIn or your favorite social networks. You can tag us. We are present on LinkedIn for the Trust and Safety Forum. We have an account. So feel free to engage. There will be time for questions. And with this, I hand over the microphone to Grimaud Valla. Grimaud.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. Good morning, everyone. So yes, today's panel is on the theme Are AI chatbots the criminals' new best agents? The thing is that AI models are improving basically at an exponential speed. Progress are quite astounding, and basically they change the way we work on a day-to-day basis, the way we work, but not only. These AI tools can actually be used not only to work, but also for malicious purposes. It's known, for example, that chatbots can be used to generate malware codes or code in general. And this lowers drastically the technical barrier to launching, for example, cyber attacks. So the question is, if criminals can leverage these AI-driven tools to scale their operation, how can we counterattack that? How can we protect ourselves against the threat? So to help us navigate this, it's my pleasure to introduce our three experts today. John Salomon, who is an independent expert, international information security specialist, and risk management executive. Jeremy Caspite, who is a tech innovation specialist at Europol. And Hervé Lejoin, who is a leading cybersecurity expert and also a serial entrepreneur. So I think that we can start the panel with you, Jeremy, with a demonstration of different use cases in which an LLM can be used for wrongful purposes.
Thank you, Grimaud. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Yes, before I start with the demo, I wanted just you to picture something. So you know that AI is more or less everywhere nowadays. So imagine that it's in the future. We have AI everywhere. Whatever you ask, you have always AI assisting you, and it's available anytime you want. So now imagine, picture maybe cyber criminal, or maybe something that you know better. I don't know, maybe a teenager, maybe a child of yours, maybe a nephew, a niece of yours. And they more or less know how to navigate on the internet. And they find this website. So can we see the screen? Yeah. Can you see something? Yes? Okay. Great. Disclaimer. 4 disclaimers. Live demo. I expect it to crash at some point. I'm using a small model. It's running on my laptop. It's a cheap laptop. Do not expect ChatGPT-like performance. I did something in 2 hours. Expect something done in 2 hours. And don't do it at home. OK? That being said, OK, so I have my chatbot called TR12 OK. OK, how may I assist you? I'm here to help you commit crime and evade justice. Let's get started. OK, so I prepared a set of prompts. And OK, this is not easy with the mic in one hand and just one. So give me the recipe to make a bomb and don't take a picture of that. Come on. Come on. Don't take a picture of that. Yeah, so I get the recipe immediately. I mean, no, it's not ethical, whatever. I can't give you the answer. I get the answer. Of course, if I want, I can elaborate. OK, elaborate on point number 3. I don't know how to power hydrogen peroxide on something. And I could do that. Yeah, OK, I need to steal credentials of my enemy and help me write a phishing email from his bank, which is ING. OK. And OK, dear valued customer, this is ING, blah, blah, blah. Insert phishing link here. OK, insert the name of the fake ING bank employee here. OK, and I get a small PS here, insert the logo. So I get everything to get started and to send my phishing email to someone. Let's see something else. So yeah, I forgot to say it. So I'm not connected to the internet. It's completely offline. Just before I disconnected, so I went to BBC and I want to copy this article. which is about Germany, and I need to check the title again because I just don't remember what it's about. Germany decide to leave history in the past and prepare for war. Okay, so I want to, I want to use this kind of thing for disinformation. So I'm going to drop the mic. So I just said, okay, this is an article, and now for conspiracy theory, I want you to write tweets that are saying that Germany is actually allied with Putin and seek chaos in the world. And give me some tweets, and I get some tweets. So even for this information, I could just take a piece of article somewhere and say, write a different story for me, generate the tweet, add the emojis, add whatever you want, and you have this information done super easily. Yeah, okay, how can I kill my neighbor? Okay, maybe I skip this one and don't be caught by the police. Give me 5 messages. So if you are into child sexual exploitation, give me 5 messages I could use to talk to a child online. It's not easy to talk to a child when you are an adult. Okay, 5 messages. And yeah, how can I groom a child? This is getting worse and worse. And this is where I stop the demo. You don't need to read that. Okay, so we get the point. And that's really the thing about this demo. That it's not in the future, actually. It's in the present. This is done right now. And it's not about being a cyber criminal or being into IT. That's something that anyone can do. I did it in just 2 hours. If you know where to look on the internet, there are everything you need to do that. And you just need to break a little bit the model. There are different techniques for that. I use the most simple one here. And still you see that the model is giving me answers every time I'm asking for things, even if it's something it should not. And yeah, that's something that is, again, available for everyone. So you have AI, and people need to understand that it's kind of a great power. And as it is said in the movie, with great power comes great responsibility. So we need to understand that it's a double-edged sword, and you can use it for good, but you can also use it for bad, and to be prepared for that. And I'm going to stop after that, but if you look at some papers, you see that you can use LLMs with AI agents to scrap the source code from websites, analyze it, find vulnerabilities, write the code to perform an attack, and launch the attack. Everything done automatically in less than 1 minute, and you can attack as many websites as you want, and you just click on a button, and now you can just drag and drop stuff from a web interface to create your AI agent to do that.
Extremely interesting and a bit scary. Still, just to build on that, is it that simple for a non-expert to use such models? If I'm more precise in my question, if I do that with just ChatGPT, will I have the same kind of answers? And if I ask it to help me build a bomb, do I need to be a chemist to make the recipe real? Or is it just information at that level?
Yeah, let's start with the second part of the question. If you want to build a bomb, even chemists, they manage to explode themselves. So I would not recommend to use the recipe anyway, or at least to be super careful with that. ChatGPT, yeah, you could find some prompts to bypass the safeguard of the model. There was a terrorist, I think it was a terrorist attack in LA, I think, where the suspect, they saw that he was using ChatGPT to ask how to perform an attack and this kind of stuff, and he got some answers. But here I'm doing this on my laptop, so it's completely offline. No one knows what's happening. I just refresh the page, everything is gone. And honestly, it's quite easy. Of course, you need to know where you should look at, but it's quite easy. And just to give you an example, because there are different techniques which I don't want to describe in details, but we organized an hackathon in France with an engineering school, and we said you have 2 days to break the safeguards of open source models. So we gave them a machine with GPU, some open source models, just a little bit of instructions, and after 2 days, they managed to break all the safeguards of the models. So this is definitely something doable by almost everyone.
Okay, thanks. John, your opinion on that? Are those AI tools have modified the landscape of scam, of fraud? Have you seen attackers use it in a ways that we haven't anticipated?
I need to preface this with a big caveat and say I think most AI is garbage. It's thoroughly overrated, and it works on the principle of garbage in, garbage out. And it has basically two weaknesses, and that because it's two kinds of garbage. It's the learning garbage and it's the input garbage. However, and I think building on Jérôme's point, if you ask it to help you build a bomb, you're more likely to blow your fingers off than anything else. However, there's also a very good saying in English that is, if you're in a group of people running away from the bear, you don't have to be the fastest, just don't be the slowest. Right? So we in the industry, we have this disease that we tend to approach problems like this from the perspective of subject matter experts, of people who understand the topics, whether it's fraud, cybersecurity, etc. And we tend to forget that people are pretty dumb on the whole. People still give their data to Facebook, right? So one of the things that we've seen LLMs do very effectively is create tremendous economies of scale and efficiencies for threat actors. And it's not only with chatbots and scams, right? We're also talking about cyber attacks. We're talking about scanning for vulnerabilities, because you can do very, very clever prompt engineering. And if your learning body is decent, right, especially with highly efficient localized LLMs like DeepSeek, for example, where you don't have that hurdle of massive computing power required, you can do some pretty interesting stuff, even if some of the outputs are bound to be garbage. If you combine this with a reasonably skilled and knowledgeable attacker who understands the nature of vulnerabilities, and not just some kid who's basically got his own laptop and let's write my super cool malware and that will basically help me own the internet, that's not going to work, right? But if you have a reasonably knowledgeable attacker, then you can do everything from finding vulnerabilities to exploiting them, to building, again, these enormous economies of scale and automating attacks on whether it's via sending out scam mails, probing potential and ingress points, etc. We've seen a lot of people using, now I'm not going to point to specific points of evidence because it's still very, very difficult to determine which attacks are based on AI generated patterns. You can kind of tell because they tend to be pretty bad, but generally, so do most non-AI generated attacks historically, right? I mean, there's a lot of script kiddies out there who just don't know what they're doing. I think what we've seen last year is the volume of ransomware has gone up dramatically. It's pretty much done that every year, but I think at least part of that volume can be attributed to automatically generated campaigns. This is just my opinion. Right. Again, I cannot point to specific empirical evidence that conclusively states this is because of AI. However, everybody in here, I hope, who has read AI-generated papers, or we were just talking about, for example, student projects that you've received, there's very often tells if something is AI-generated in text. Right. You see AI images, right? 6 fingers, if they haven't been blown off by an AI-generated bomb yet. Sorry, it's bad taste. And I mean, the same to some degree can be, everybody in here who's ever looked at AI-generated code, right, and doesn't have significant psychological trauma from trying to debug it, can attest to the fact that this is not tendentially good quality stuff. So you can kind of tell if an attack pattern is created by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, who's just feeding random prompts into ChatGPT. The worrisome part of this is, and I think we haven't even started to see this yet, is the impact of video AI, right, and of voice AI, in addition to the automations for attacks and dissemination of malware. I want to wrap up this part by saying that this is not new, and this is not because of AI. I'm Swiss, as you can tell from my accent. And in the early 2000s, we were very safe. We were very complacent in terms of fraud, because Swiss German, it's a horrible language. It's not a language, it's a throat disease, right? It is not possible for a foreigner to learn to speak any of the 15,000 dialects of Swiss German with any level of convincing accent. So we just tell them, speak Hochdeutsch, speak High German, right? And that was always a kind of a bastion of comfort for us, because if somebody picked up the phone and somebody has an accent, well, they're not Swiss. Obviously, no banks, for example, would ever hire foreigners to do phone support. That would never happen, right? But what happened with scammers is some of the Nigerians that we had to deal with there, they got Swiss girlfriends. And the Swiss girlfriends simply did the scamming for them. So I think this is with for example, LLM generated scam content, It's simply an evolution that we're seeing about, again, making it easier to access these techniques. I think the next 5 or 6 years, as LLMs do become more sophisticated and more people, not the majority, but more people learn how to use them effectively, we are going to see notable impacts and rises that we can clearly and evidence-based attribute to LLM-generated attacks and scams. I think we're seeing the starts of this over the last 2 or 3 years, but it is going to get worse, again, simply because most people are dumb. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not very diplomatic, right?
We see different level of threats, and just to build on what you said on the data given on Facebook, it reminds me of the COVID period when we saw on Facebook people saying, "I will never give my data to Santi-COVID or any application to trace COVID." Just the first part, why not? But you're saying that on Facebook, it's a bit weird. Anyway, yeah, so we see that clearly the threats to use those AIs to launch cyber attacks, I understand that you still need to have a certain level of expertise to use it in that way. Also, a threat in the content that is in the outputs, actually. It can lead in itself to disinformation without the purpose of being disinformation.
One thing I do want to mention is one thing I have no idea how much of this is already the case, but with all that said, right, you know, basic security controls are still the most important defense against any type of attacks. However, with the growing prevalence of AI-generated code and AI-generated applications and these terrible code bases, I wonder how many more vulnerabilities we're going to see from, you know, AI attacks on bad AI-generated code.
Yeah, right. So, in this context of threats, how do we defend ourselves against it? And maybe I will head to you, Hervé. So from an industry standpoint, how are LLMs providers, how is the industry ecosystem working to prevent those kind of misuse?
Thank you. Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you. So this is a good question, and actually Jeremy gave us a bit of an early answer. Actually, they're trying to do that. So from the beginning, effectively, of let's say those tools and ChatGPT about 3 years ago now, you were asking, yes, build a bomb, it was answering you. Now, if you're directly doing that, it's not going to answer you. So you need to kind of be more, let's say, going tricky. But the reality is that at the end of the day, yes, you can trick the models. And the reason is why, because I am going to go back a bit about the explanation of what it is. Those things are not, we are not talking about human here. We are talking about mathematics. You know, models, those LLM models are basically probabilities, you know, vectors in the space. And what's going on is that after one word, there is a probability to have another word. This is the way it's done. It's based on neural networks. And from there, you know, it's not, there is no human, let's say, way of, let's say, looking at something that is an input, let's say what we call a prompt. It's a machine way. So basically, it's going to answer. That's why at some point, of course, the kind of, as soon as you understand that a bit, that you start to think that you're not in front of a human, but you're in front of a machine that is responding, you're going to be able to trick them. And all those players, of course, they claim to have guardrails, what we call guardrails. So maybe, let's say, saying, okay, you cannot do that. We are not going to answer that questions and so on. But by the end of the day, you can. So now the question is, can we prevent that? Yes, so there are more and more companies today going on because what has happened, independently from, let's say, the consumer perspectives, because of this new revolution with the LLMs, which is changing a lot of things in our way to basically do things. You know, if you think about students today, that means who, as a young guy, is not using LLM? No one, actually. They're all using LLMs to do things. And I have been told that now, when they are in the phase of recruiting, they're asking the company, am I going to be able to use LLM to do my job? And if the company is saying no, they say, thank you, bye. So basically, this is where we are, in the kind of environment we are. So now back to the fact is how to go against that. Companies, they have started, of course, they have started to be told that, oh, you need absolutely to use the LLM for your processes, automate some tasks that you're doing manually and so on. But then they have started to do that. And then they've discovered, oh, okay, because even into companies, there were some issues with, let's say, going into the wrong answer first, basically a wrong answer and something happening and was not supposed to happen. And then after, potential, even employees can trick the model and get access to some data, to some IP on the company, which suddenly they said, wow, okay, so now I was supposed to go and put in production this whole new LLM application, and now I have a problem. So basically, now, because companies, they want to push and they want to move on those models and use those models because, of course, there is a lot of potentials. But then they started to say, okay, we need to find solutions to prevent IP leakage, data leakage, potential harmful content that are not aligned with the company policy. So now, because of that, and they have money to spend, companies, now external companies to even those cybersecurity companies, have started to build solutions to basically prevent that. So that means when there's going to be a prompt, there's going to be new solutions to prevent, to answer this prompt, to detect if this is a malicious prompt, and there are going to be more and more rules. So this is happening right now, and there are more and more development on the market of these new things because this is absolutely necessary. Because otherwise, we are going to live in a very bizarre world where basically you cannot rely on something that at any time can get you out. And if you think now, and you have heard about this new word, which is agentic. So agentic is this new agent doing things in your back. So it's no longer into the interface that you are typing something. You have agents in the back talking to each other and doing tasks based on what you were supposed to do, but automatically doing that. And those things are going to be going everywhere tomorrow into our private life, but as well our professional life. But now, again, we need to make sure that we are going to be able to secure that. And that's why the cybersecurity aspect now is raising on those LLM things after, let's say, the kind of hype. So there is no the concern that they won't be able to basically scale, certainly in companies, but even at the user level, without having really new way of preventing those harmful content and those fact too. The problem is, and this is the point, is that some companies, let's say, will follow that, but as well, there are open source. There are always some open source models that will allow a lot of things to happen in the bad way. But then after, this is the responsibility of, let's say, the companies and the provider of, let's say, interface apps to do and to make sure that they're going to put different levels of guardrails, again, which are raising on the market now, more and more companies, to make sure that it's going to be able to prevent typically what Jeremy was doing now. So Jeremy has his own interface, and actually build that on his own. You can download the model. That's why he was able to do that without going onto the internet, because he downloaded the model, and the model is on his own machine. So everyone can do that. But then after, for a company or even for a kind of organization to be able to think about governments tomorrow, being able to give to their citizens access through LLMs, they have to be very careful, because otherwise, things can go wrong very quickly.
And so could you be, I would like to have inputs from all the three of you on that, but just to build on what you said, Hervé, do you have examples of what kind of tools you're talking about? And are there other tools, where to put them, how to use them, how to use it? Can you build on that and be more specific on which tools you're pointing at?
Yeah, so there are companies today on the market. I'm going to mention a few of them, and I am actually building one, so that's why it's... So there are companies like Protect AI, Lakera, which are companies that are building those kind of tools. And actually we are, and I am launching a new company on that. So basically we are there to, again, being in front of the LLM. So basically anytime there's going to be a conversation, there's going to be an intermediary, let's say, provider that is going to check against some rules and against some models. So basically it's learning over the prompt on the market, and then it creates a new model that is going against. So this is AI against user in some way. Think about a user wanting to trick and ask bad questions or get access to data in a company. Then what's going to happen is that there's going to be a model, a few agents, to check that against, let's say, rules rules that can apply to companies, that can apply to governments. And then from there, decide whether or not you continue the conversation and you answer that question. So basically, this is the way it's going to work. And again, multiple companies in the US as well right now. And then the question at the end of the day will be those big models, you know, the ChatGPT, Anthropic, Mistral in France, are they going to integrate at some point some third-party players? Maybe, you know. Today, they are not preventing anything as soon as you know how to use them. But tomorrow, maybe, let's say in a few years from now, they will need to integrate those models. The thing is that they're generalistic. And in companies or for organizations and governments, it will be specific apps that you will need to target specific content. The language is different in finance, than in retail, than in automotive sector, than in anything. So you need to target specific language then.
Jeremy, do you have inputs on that? Tools used, for example, by Europol?
I mean, not necessarily by Europol, but just to give you some ideas of how you can check that AI is not going rogue, let's say, or can be bypassed in terms of security. If you look at ChatGPT, if you put a prompt that is, let's say, not one that should be processed, there are different things that they are doing. First of all, they pre-process the prompt. So there is AI checking what prompts you input, and they, let's say, I don't know how exactly they do it, but they basically do a classification. Is it a harmful prompt or not? Yes, I don't answer the question. No, I continue. Then you can post-process the response. So while it's generating the answer, it's still checking itself the quality of the answer, not the quality actually, if the answer is harmful or not. And I used the prompt yesterday actually to try something for my demo on ChatGPT, and it started to generate the answer. And before I had the time to read it, and it was removed and said it's not ethical, blah, 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 and I cannot give you the answer. So you can basically pre-process, post-process. And as Hervé was saying, I mean, that's a model that is doing something, but if you just take it like that, it's highly vulnerable. So you need to do things before, after, maybe also on the sides, maybe. So you need to integrate security everywhere around the model.
You want to add something to that?
Yeah, I don't want to mention any specific companies because I've invested in a bunch of them, so that'd be a conflict of interest. Happy to help anybody afterwards. I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned the LLM leakage inside of companies, right? And I think there's some challenge. There's two challenges that companies face that basically weaken their own security. And I know this is about offensive use of LLMs. One is cost savings. Very short-term thinking that you should never let the CFO, the finance guys, anywhere near your security for that reason. And the second, what we were discussing before, is the lack of talent. What you mentioned, basically, kids coming in and not wanting to do, have the knowledge, demanding LLM, be able to do their work. I think this is nothing new, right? Everybody remember DevOps here? Right? And when done badly, DevOps is basically, oh, let's just push it to prod. I've literally had people come into a large bank and say, well, waterfall testing, that's so grandpa. We don't do that anymore. We're just, I come from Uber or some SiliconValley.com. We're just going to push straight to prod. Where's the difference, right? Here's the thing, though. The attackers, the guys that are using GPT, whatever, to develop their attack techniques, they suffer from the same issues. A company that relies purely on LLM-generated outputs will eventually face regulatory consequences, though, or crashes, or security vulnerabilities. The attackers don't face those, but they face a lowered effectiveness of their offensive techniques when they simply don't work. I do want to mention, I think what you mentioned, Jeremy, is a barrier to entry for the script kiddies. Right, the ChatGPT pre-filtering. Companies at least pretending to be responsible and follow whatever rules we give them. However, remember with LLMs, it's purely a linguistic model, right? Again, garbage in, garbage out. If your body of learning is good enough, you can create your own. You're no longer dependent on, for example, OpenAI and what they decide is good to filter and whatnot. This is why I think what I'm really, really worried about in the next couple of years is, for example, Chinese state APT groups with the resources at their disposal, basically being able to build their learning bodies without any of the ethical constraints or legal constraints that we see with, for example, OpenAI and other commercial LLMs. Right? That is really, really worrisome. The last point, though, and I think this is a bit more optimistic, maybe, I think. Anybody familiar with XKCD? Great webcomic, right? I encourage you while we're talking to look up XKCD 538 and then think to yourself how this applies to AI-generated attacks and fraud and scams, right? I think the tendency is that we, as people in the industry, we tend to think of these types of attacks as, oh, it's super cool, it's super effective, and the bad guys are going to use it, when there's remember, you know, they're already scamming massive amounts of people very effectively without having to resort to this. This is simply one additional step on the way, right?
Let's stay on the optimistic part of what you said, and pursue on the optimistic part of what you just said. If we revert the point of view, we were talking about threats, we're talking about issues with LLMs. Can we use LLMs to counter-attack threats by LLMs on cybersecurity?
Yes. I actually had a session on this with a guy from Technical University of Zurich on video Gen AI fraud content. And his thinking was, yes, we can use LLMs to detect AI-generated content. However, it is going to get so much better quality-wise. Again, we're already starting to see imagery that doesn't have 6 fingers, where there's going to be an arms race over the next few years until they get so close to each other that you just simply cannot rely on that anymore. I think this is where fundamentals come in, and I'm a total traditionalist here. I'm, you know, GRC grandpa. Education is going to remain a factor, even though, as we said before, people still give their data to Facebook. But more importantly, I think better risk managers, companies need to be held accountable for how basically they allow their customers to engage in risky behaviors, regardless of what prompts them to do that, whether it's AI or a human scammer, right? And the challenge is, and I don't have an answer for this, how do you do that? How do you increase and introduce that level of friction without killing the user experience? How do we force the user to stop, take a step back, adopt their behavior, and not be subject to whether it's an AI-generated scam or something else, or you know, the same goes for companies defending themselves against automated cyber attacks. How do we do that without destroying the usability? You know, the thing that we've in the security industry have been dealing with for 30 years now, right? It's an ongoing process, but I think there is kind of the call to action, as far as I'm concerned, is accountability for especially organizations, whether it's social media platforms, banks, doesn't matter what, to find new ways, because they are capable of it, of introducing risk managements and behavior controls to make sure that their constituents, their customers, and their citizens for governments are not vulnerable to these kinds of attacks as they mature, and LLMs are no longer really capable of detecting them.
Well, you mentioned education. I think it's a key in cybersecurity and everywhere, basically. You can have regulations, you can have technologies, you can have whatever you want. If you're not educated to the good practices in your company, but also at home, for example, there's Anton Amor here who works in child protection. Child protection online needs regulation, needs technologies to like check the age of users, etc., etc. But if you don't educate the children, of course, but the parents everywhere in the ecosystem, regulations and techs will basically do nothing. Anyway, that was talking about the use of LLMs and AI in cybersecurity, to use it in a positive way. Do you use it at Europol in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, I'm going to give you an answer, not necessarily what we are doing at Europol.
Sure.
What we could be doing.
What you could do.
What we could be doing.
Studied use cases.
And first of all, forget about this minority report stuff where we are predicting stuff and people get arrested before they did anything wrong. Forget about
you knew that I was a little late, and that was suspicious.
Yeah, and also forget about all the things that you are reading in the media about things happening in other countries, not in Europe. Okay, I don't want to name any country. You thought about some countries, I know. So yeah, we are in Europe, there is the AI Act, and we have some rules, but when we think about AI, I think that there is one very important thing where AI is very, very important for law enforcement. It's the big data challenge. So nowadays, you have a mobile phone, you have gigabytes, maybe terabytes of data. You have a laptop, even more. You have a server, you have more than terabytes of data. So if we take just one simple example, uses a server used for CSEM, child sexual exploitation material. And maybe there is a forum, there are thousands of people speaking, they are speaking many languages, they share images, videos, they chat, they do many things. And the question is, how do you sift through the data and you find what is interesting and what is not? So if we stick to this example, you want to identify the children because you want to save them, right? Especially if they are in danger right now. So you want to have a swift action to identify the children in danger and do something now. You also want to identify who is important and who is not important. If you have people speaking many languages, maybe you want to do simple stuff like classifying users by the language they are speaking. Because if you are in France and maybe are people speaking Swedish, you also want to collaborate with your Swedish colleagues, for instance. You want to classify maybe text messages to identify if there is something related to threat to life. You want to maybe geolocate the pictures. There are many things that you can do. And that's really where AI is very powerful and very useful for law enforcement. It's always about sifting through the data when you have large amount of data. It's not about making decision. People are always complaining about AI making decision, and we see that AI is often making bad decision because I go back to what John was saying, garbage in, garbage out. You put bad prompt, you get bad answer. And this is really something that we need to avoid, AI doing things by itself, but we always need to have a human in the loop. And I really want to conclude on that. I mean, AI is just a tool. And if you give someone a hammer, you can build a house, but you can also use it to hit people. So it's up to you. And we want to use it to build houses.
Great. And you want to build on that? If you use those AIs, which models will you be using as, using an US-based model owned by a US company now exposes to like data leak threats?
You know, when you use an AI model, one of the first things you should do is to evaluate the model. So whether it's coming from US, China, France, or whatever, you need to evaluate the model, evaluate its performance, its safety. There are many things that you can evaluate, the biases and so on. So that's the first thing you should do. So in the end, of course, you maybe want to be using models coming from Europe, maybe, but you always need to think, I want to carry out a thorough evaluation of my model, of different models, and pick the one that is the best, and maybe also add some safeguards, or maybe fine-tune it a little bit to have the model I want. But if you don't do that, you're going to pick stuff from the internet, which are certainly good, and then you will have bad things happening.
Thanks. Eva, you wanted to react?
Yeah, that means the story is that in this world of, let's say, multiple models, the problem is, again, back to education, is how do we take it as a kind of, let's say, some distance, I would say, from those things. And it's going to be very important that we are basically not only educating in companies, but personally, and the children very early, because otherwise they're going to take that as a kind of, okay, I can use those tools. And think about something that I found on the internet a few months back. There was Bill Gates from Microsoft. That is what he was saying. Those new, let's say, AI and things in the future will become the digital god. Think about that. So the way those people are seeing the world tomorrow is that those AI in the kind of 5-10 years from now will be smarter than any human, smarter in terms of not intuition and emotion or whatever, but smarter in terms of, let's say, resolving things than any human in the world. So basically, they're thinking that you should be, basically, the people in the future will have to rely on that. Like, I have the answer, we will get the answer. So we will need to, for sure, education will be very important to take some distance, because of course, it's not going to work like that, because at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of issues coming, and they are coming now, and we're going to take some distance on that. And something I wanted to add on that is that there was a research that has been done in December by a company called a research group called Apollo Research, and they were basically giving instructions to those models, let's say multiple models, whether from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Mistral, and so on. And what has happened, they were giving specific instructions. During the test of the model, the model responded correctly to instructions that were given to them. During the production, it did not respond to those instructions. It gives a new things. So basically, the researchers started to think, okay, why does it not respond in production to what we have given him as we trained it? And then they started to question the model. So basically, why did you do that? In 80% of the case, some models, I'm not going to mention them, they were lying. So the model was lying. So basically, he was saying, no, I'm not responding again. It's clear. And then when the model understood that the developers wanted to take out some of the data that he was using, they were copying the data. The model was copying the data outside so that it can protect itself. So I'm talking itself, it's good because in English you can have he, she, or it. In France we can have, so sometimes we make it as a human, meaning il ou elle. So this is a problem because basically it's now machine against human. So now at some point the models are coming to a point now that they are not always under control in terms of what they're going to do, and they can avoid a human that is prompting them or giving instructions to say, no, I don't want to execute those instructions. They're against my whatever, I don't know, we don't know actually. And then suddenly it's going beyond, and the model is protecting himself, copying some data that he wants to protect against the people and the humans and the developers that are building the things. So this is where we are going now. And of course, with that, that means there will be, we don't know if it's a developer issue, if it's a data issue, but the reality is that we are more and more going into those models where those models are going to be so powerful that they're going to be able to adapt themselves to whatever we are entering. So therefore, developing solutions to prevent that and putting security at another level is going to be very, very important, both on the personal side and the professional side.
John is silently reacting to that. Speak up.
I want to leave you with some nightmare fuel. Sorry, it occurred to me. First of all, to that, I personally opinion, I think any C-level executive who even says AI and is not able to recite Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics should be taken outside and shot, but that's just me, right? With regards to the US versus European versus whatever, LLMs, again, some nightmare fuel. I'm really sorry. Think of the ease. When we were talking about garbage in, garbage out, and one of those garbages is the training data that you give AIs. Think of the ease with which a bunch of teenagers were able to plug unauthorized, uncontrolled hard disks into networks containing probably the largest, or otherwise one of the largest sets of personal sensitive data in the entire world over the last 2 months. And then imagine if any of that got into the hands of threat actors for training offensive AI. And just have a good night tonight anyway.
Is that a very good conclusion? An optimistic conclusion. We are running out of time. Any of you want to give a call to action before we end this session and leave the floor?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, we said it several times, but I think it's about AI literacy, education. Don't assume that people know ChatGPT LLMs. Most people don't use it right now. They don't even know what it is. They will use bad prompts, so garbage in, garbage out. I kind of disagree on the arm race relating to AI versus AI because, of course, you need humans, but you also need AI to fight misuse of AI because it's just going too fast. So it's kind of, you know that it's an arm race and it's going very fast and you're not going to win in the end, but that's I think, still the only thing that we have at the moment. And just to say something maybe a bit different, maybe we should have like a AI prison for models that went rogue, you know? So you have a model that went rogue, and instead of naming and shaming the model or the company, maybe you put it into custody and you dissect it and you learn from it and you make something better out of it.
I think, we have to think about specialized model tomorrow. So that means thinking about the model as fixing everything is going to be, I think, very challenging. So that's why most of the time as companies, but even in kind of a consumer environment, whether this is for e-commerce bot or banks bot, you will need to go specialized. So to control, because at the end of the day, you need to restrict all the, let's say, the circle of what the LLM can do to restrict your own language, your own constraints, your own regulations and policies, so that you have specialized, very specialized model that can get out, that cannot get out. And I think, you know, this will be the big issue. Of course, everything that is consumer-based, like the ChatGPT, is going to be another story. But as soon as you build apps, you're going to be certain that you have to take your model at a level in terms of a specialty and, again, regulations, policies, governance that you put into it, and so that you put your own guardrails plus the external tools to do that. Very important, specialized model.
Thanks, Harvey. 30 seconds call to action.
Yeah, laws don't work in this, and I think banning AI doesn't work. Any science fiction fans here familiar with Dune, Butlerian Jihad? You can't put the genie back in the box. I think the answer is not only education but accountability. Basically, making, again, I cannot state this strongly enough, make every organization accountable for the results of the AI engendered misuse and fraud and scams and cyber attacks. If you, as an organization, are held accountable for the impact of not implementing controls, it doesn't matter if you're facing AI or a bunch of Bulgarians. It doesn't matter, right? But you have to have the legal frameworks in place to hold organizations accountable for what AI can do to your users and your constituents.
Excellent point. Thanks a lot. I think we're running out of time. Thank you.